All right, free to land. What we're going to do right now is we're going to have one of our very own instructors. And by the way, free to land, everyone, I am Zalika or Z. We're going to bring up one of our instructors, Makani, and please give her a warm welcome. She's going to get the ball rolling this evening, and then we're going to also meet our lecturer. All right, take it away, Mom.
Greetings, beloveds. I'm so happy to see you, to be with you, free the land. Happy Sunday. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please do not forget to make sure that we get to know your name and your pronouns, so your name, rename yourself, and also drop your greetings in the chat. We're so grateful to have you, and I'm really excited about today and our speaker today, which we'll hear more about in just a second. Um, my name is Makani Temba, as folks said. I'm an organizer with the Jackson chapter, in addition to all the things that some of you know about me in the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Um, for folks who don't know, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement is an organization of Black, as we say, new African people who believe in our right to self-determination, self-defense, and self-respect. And we situate ourselves and we strive to honor and respect and be a part of the long legacy of revolutionary struggle for the liberation of our people. And so I'm going to see how the slides are catching up. Let me make sure. Here we go. Here we go. Here's our principles of unity. We defend the human rights of all African people. We demand reparations. We promote self-determination. We oppose genocide. As, um, as my hip hop people say, everywhere, worldwide. We demand the release of all political prisoners, prisoners of war, and political prisoners. And an important principle that we are going to get into today even more deeply, thanks to our speaker, is we also work to struggle to end gender. Um, and sorry, my I need to clean my glasses. Um, we struggle to gender and sexual oppression. And so family, um, just a little bit more about us. We have some things that we operate and we work to live by. And so you see the slide up there. These are our principles. Um, and we call these sort of aspects of what we strive to be in terms of our own personality and operations. And we also try to carry this into this class and our gathering to always be humble when dealing with African people and you can be humble and firm at the same time. Respect the actions and customs of other. Never engage in petty, senseless arguments. Thank you. Having it in the chat as well. Um, do not go looking for arguments, ideological or otherwise, because we're trying to be curious and stay and listening to each other because we always have things to learn. But also never be afraid to wage ideological struggle or ask questions. Like I said, be curious, establish political clarity because this is how we learn, this is how we build. And I'm old enough to know that the person that I was when I first started on this journey is not the person that I am today. And that's because of my comrades, as they say, steel sharpens steel. Never talk just to be seen, right? Um, because that's not helpful. That doesn't keep us curious. And also just always practice criticism and self-criticism because that's also how we sharpen and engage with each other. Um, yes, it is obscuring us a little bit. So um, We also operate by the Seven Commandments, what we call the Commandments of Umoja, which is really just common sense of what it means to practice, Black love and Black self-love, aid each other, be positive, be patient, be honest. Um, and this is like my test, right, to see if I remember what this fifth commandment is. Y'all are testing the elderly. Do that, okay? Thank you. Show courage, listen as much as you talk, and be programmatic, which means essentially let's not just stay in the place of problem. Let us be about what are the solutions, how can we think about it, and how does our work align with actual constructive programming. And I'm going to check the chat to make sure that there aren't any questions. And it's good to see folks again. Welcome. Now, this is where I get the opportunity um, to um, introduce and for us to listen to someone who I really love our work. But I realize there's a couple of things I need to do really quick before that. One is we have our community agreements, which we talked about earlier, right, in terms of the aspects of the MXGM personality. We also have the Seven Commandments of Umoja. Because we keep us safe, we have that not only through the community agreements, but we have digital security that'll be here to support us in the classes and around because y'all know it's out crazy out here sometimes in these digital online streets. So we keep us safe and we want to make sure that we engage. And if you have any concerns, please privately chat with the hosts. And so, yes, now that we've done all of the housekeeping and the sharing, and I want to encourage people to continue to introduce themselves and greet in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Make sure that your name and your pronouns are how you rename yourself, so we can um, make sure that we're holding that together because we are committed to seeing each other and in all the ways that we need to because again we're about that human rights, we're about that humanity, we're about that love and positivity with each other. So with that, I get to introduce our speaker, our lecturer, as we say, for today. And I'm really excited because, we think a lot in MXGM about intersectionality around gender. And for me, as a person who's been in the movement a long time, I'm so grateful that we are at this place because I have lived through some other times. We'll just put it like that. So I'm really, really, really grateful. So introducing Dr. Ashley L. Smith Purviance, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies and African American and African Studies at The Ohio State University. Um, Her scholarship critically analyzes how social structures, education policies, and institutions shape and reproduce harmful inequities, I'll say, for Black women and girls. As a community engaged scholar, her research also explores Black geographies and alternative educational spaces, also known as Black girl spaces, created by and for Black girls. And I'm also really excited because part of what we'll get to hear about and you'll get an opportunity to ask questions as well is yes is us really looking closely at what this anti-Black girl violence looks like in these institutions. Because a lot of times, feminine is often erased in our movement conversations about education justice. So I'm really proud and grateful and honored to bring on Dr. Ashley Smith Purviance today. So welcome her with all the love. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really so grateful to be here. Thank you, Makani, for that beautiful introduction. I also want to give a big thank you to Z as well, Zalika, for bringing me here. You've been an amazing friend and sister, and so I'm just deeply grateful. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you all. I do have slides for today. All right. Just want to check in. Are you all able to see the slides? And is it just slides? No, no notes or anything, just the slide. Good. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Um, so again, it's truly an honor to be in this space tonight. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you all. I'll be presenting to you today on a strand of my academic research titled The Realities and Refusals of Anti-Black Girl Violence in Schools. So I do want to do a little bit of setting the context before I begin, just to make a note that this presentation and the content, some of it is heavy. And so just a reminder to please take care of yourselves. If I need to pause, please just let me know. I don't mind interruption, so please just let me know. I want to mention that this research that I'll share is largely about Black girls' experiences in schools as and how they experience schools as violent spaces. I also want to make a note that I deeply believe in truth telling and doing so from the lenses of young Black girls who have shared their stories and realities with me. And so I just ask that we sit with their narratives, sit with their stories today in the hopes to dream up a better world for them. But in the context of taking care of ourselves while we are here, I do want to kind of give a bit of a warning that the content is of a sensitive nature regarding violence, assault, mental health, as well as suicide and unaliving. And so I'll just dive right in and get to it. So honestly and truly, school, schooling, and education have a long history of existing as sites of harm and violence for Black girls. And I often think of Ruby Bridges, who is photographed here. I don't want to be like too repetitive or lectury. I'm sure many of us are familiar with her story, but I do know that there is many other ways in which her story gets a bit misrepresented. And so in the 1960s, during the desegregation era, one of the first Black children to enter an all white school was a 6-year-old Black girl named Ruby Bridges. While she is often celebrated for her courage and tenacity, the violence she faced upon entering a segregated white school has often been lost in conversations that instead center on her perseverance. She, like many Black girls today, experienced suffering upon entering the school building, where she was met with angry, threatening mobs of white people who shouted slurs and threw various objects at her. Death threats ensued, such as when she was confronted by a white woman who placed a Black doll in a coffin to threaten her life. Once inside the school building, she was excluded, ostracized, and isolated from her peers. She was denied access to recess in the playground and was confined to one classroom where she worked with the same teacher each day. She continued to face verbal and physical violence upon her exit as the school day ended. Her bravery made her a pioneer for school desegregation efforts and simultaneously normalized her fear and her suffering. Narratives about Ruby Bridges' trailblazer status are complicit in ignoring the fact that a 6-year-old Black girl was subjected to the most egregious forms of violence. Over 60 years later, integrated and segregated urban and suburban schools with either a majority of students of color or predominantly white student bodies continue to perpetuate this legacy of violence against Black girls. And so, moving on to present day examples, Black girls unfortunately continue to be one of the most vulnerable and targeted groups of students in schools today and are increasingly victims of traumatizing school violence. For example, in October of 2015, news media repeatedly played a video recording of a 16-year-old Black girl being violently pulled from her desk, thrown across the floor, and handcuffed by a white male school resource officer during a math class at a suburban high school. Reports later suggested the young girl experienced physical injuries and emotional and psychological trauma as a result of the incident. In February 2019, an 11-year-old Black girl was removed from her classroom, violently thrown to the ground, and punched by a white male teacher. The child's mother told the news, I could tell, like by the way she was crying and talking, that something traumatic had just happened. She was crying, her lip was cracked, bleeding, and she handed me three of her braids that were pulled out of her scalp during the altercation. In February 2020, a 6-year-old Black girl was removed from school by a police officer because she was deemed, quote, a threat to herself and others, and out of control during a temper tantrum. She was taken to a mental health facility, sedated, and held for 48 hours without her mother's consent. Video footage released later showed the officer during their commute saying, she's fine, there's nothing wrong with her. Her attorney reported that in the aftermath, this young girl is exhibiting more fearful, anxious behavior. These are only three of the numerous violent incidents involving Black girls at school, for which we have news reports that briefly describe the trauma the girls faced in the aftermath. Unfortunately, we never fully become aware of the long-term effects Black girls suffer after experiencing violent school events, nor do we learn what happens once they return to the schools and what supportive measures are provided for them, if any. As a result, their stories and their pain remain untold and ignored. The depth of violence and trauma each girl experienced in their schools and classroom settings suggests that Black girls are not allowed to be children, and each attempt to portray childlike behaviors are met with serious violent consequences. And so as it relates to like school discipline statistics, this is just some of the overview of Black girls' experiences in schools. And so I'll just quickly read off the slide. Black girls are twice as likely to be sent to the principal's office, 5 times as likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts. 12% have experienced out of school suspension in comparison to 4% Latina, 2% white girls. 19% of Black girls with disabilities experience out of school suspension. 31% of Black girls have been referred to law enforcement, and 43% have had experience with school-related arrests. And sadly, these disparities often start as early as preschool for Black youth. And so with that reality of how they're being treated within the school systems, sadly, right, Black girls are the fastest growing population of young girls being detained in juvenile systems, as they represent 58% of all juveniles in adult prisons. As a result, as it relates to sexual violence, approximately 60% of Black girls experience sexual abuse before the age of 18. And schools are also implicated in sexual violence against Black girls when they are adultified, hypersexualized, and criminalized by school dress code policies, which we may be familiar with, that disproportionately scrutinize Black girls' bodies. Internationally, we found cases where Black girls face explicit forms of sexual violence when they are criminalized and forced to be strip searched and bare their bodies to publicly be shamed and exposed to police. Black girls increasingly report that teachers and school administrators ignore or fail to address their experiences with sexual harassment in school, and they are frequently punished for retaliating against their assaulters. As they face being pushed out of school, whether it's through suspension or expulsion, they become even more vulnerable to sexual violence and sex trafficking outside of school. And Black girls have been increasingly impacted by what is called the sexual abuse to prison pipeline, as they seek refuge from sexual violence, exploitation, abuse, sex trafficking, human trafficking outside of school. They become more likely to be criminalized as a result of these experiences and detained for, quote, prostitution, truancy, and missing curfew. The invisibility of Black girls' victimization is compounded by these systems that are deeply intertwined, both within and outside of the school building, and it heightens their experiences with trauma and have a detrimental impact on their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so I want us to sit here thinking about Black girls' well-being. And I enter this conversation with the consideration of their well-being as between the years, of 2013 and 2019, Black girls ages 15 to 24 experienced an increase in suicide and unaliving rates by 59%. And so I think that we have to bring schools and education into this conversation. Like, what is the role of the school as a place of harm for Black girls, especially since they are spending majority of their time there? Where are the spaces for healing for them? And so I'm not actually interested in strategies of well-being and wellness that promote resiliency or coping. I don't dismiss those things, but I also want us to understand that what's critically important is that we are listening to Black girls, giving them space to speak, to reflect, to share their joys, but also their pains. And so this moves me to consider how the everyday interactions that Black girls experience in schools also have a negative impact on their well-being. Like, we are all too familiar with the spectacular and explicit forms of harm that I've just described in the slides previously. And they definitely, right, warrant our attention. And at the same time, we cannot overlook or continue to ignore the gratuitous, the mundane, the just because, and the everyday forms of violence that happen to them. And so when I think about why does this happen, I've had to really push myself into taking a deeper understanding of anti-Blackness, which then has pushed me to be able to theorize Black girlhood and the positioning of Black girlhood. And so through anti-Blackness scholarship, I've recognized a centering on the experience of Black suffering, which places an emphasis on surveillance, mutilation, and the murders of Black people. However, I'm also understanding, as Saidiya Hartman has educated us on, what she refers to as the afterlife of slavery, given that the everydayness of Black suffering and structural violence also shows up as, quote, skewed life chances, limited access to health and education, premature death, incarceration, impoverishment, which has all resulted in an acceptance of violence against Black people. And so this necessary emphasis on the specificity of why Black people face violence rather than simply understanding through the lens of racism has been very critical. It has also allowed me to understand the ways in which there's a failure to see Black youth as children in the first place and how they are often left out of conceptualizations of childhood. There's a normalization of seeing Black children as unintelligent or, quote, underperforming. There's oftentimes ways in which Black youth continue to be framed as untrustworthy, as devious, as criminal, as troublemakers. And all too often, the school is another site in which it maintains this captive positioning of Blackness and Black youth. And so, taking my understandings of anti-Blackness and how they operate, I'm deeply trying to understand what is it about a Black girl that causes the types of violence that we are witnessing, experiencing, that we have also faced ourselves. In 2017, the Center on Poverty and Inequality in Georgetown Law released this report titled Girlhood Interrupted: The Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood. And so they find that during ages 5 to 15, Black girls are perceived by adults to be less innocent and more adult-like, and therefore increasingly experience unfair punishment. They also, talking to educators, found that Black girls needed less nurturing, needed less protection. They felt that Black girls needed to be supported less, needed to be comforted less. They also felt like Black girls were more independent, that Black girls would know more about adult topics, and that Black girls would know more about sex. So taking what I know about anti-Blackness, what I know to be true about the ways that Black girls are being perceived, and also scholarship within Black feminisms and Black girlhood scholars who write about anti-Blackness, who write about also specifically Afro-pessimism, which is a theoretical intervention that I also engage, and how across these different frames, they all similarly argue that there's something specific about Black girlhood and womanhood. They suggest that Black women, that Black girls are understood to exist outside of human categories associated with femininity, girl, and child. And these scholars tell us that Blackness is always already positioned in an antagonistic relationship with humanity. And so, because of this, girlhood and childhood become illegible for Black girls, as they are always expected to conform to the standards of whiteness and white femininity, to disassociate with their Blackness. And when they resist this conformity, they are met with violence, discipline, and punishment. And so the mere existence of Black girlhood also exists in an antagonistic relationship with humanity and is always viewed as problem. I draw a lot on scholar Patrice Douglas, who writes that Black female gender is always undone, unrealized, and violated. And so, using this frame of anti Black girl violence, I kind of acknowledge the suffering that Black girls face in schools, which manifests through these distinct, gratuitous, mundane assaults, and in ways that perpetuate a specific anti Black and anti girl terror, which denies them access to girlhood, childhood, and humanity. And this form of violence also strips them from even being seen as a child, student, or learner within the school building. But I would also just say it's also really important for me as someone who identifies themselves as a Black girlhood scholar, to keep Black girls' voices at the center and at the and through these descriptions as well. And so, as much as I do value and lean into theory, a lot of what the girls in my study were telling me and describing to me really informed how I looked at and tried to understand what was happening to them. And I was just include myself and say us because I, in reflecting on my own life, realized and always knew that there was something that was going on with my own schooling experience that just did not make me feel well. And so I'll kind of glaze through the details of like the study that I conducted, and because I really want to get to the findings, but I'm happy to answer more questions in the Q&A, of course. But I would just say like this was a qualitative study that I conducted interviews, observations, ethnographic observations, document analysis. So I had a lot of access to like school records, documents, disciplinary reports, as well as like artwork and documentation that Black girls themselves were creating in a group that we co-created, and I'll share more about that as well. And I just wanted to note that all the names of people and locations are pseudonyms just to protect the identities of the folks that told me their stories, shared their stories with me. And so just a quick overview of like what the study entailed. So this study really highlights the experiences of Black girls in two middle schools that I named Stephen Duncan and Joshua John Ward middle schools. I'll just refer to them as Duncan and Ward throughout the presentation. And this was in the Brook-Green School District, which is a predominantly white, high resource suburban district in the Midwest. I was really seeking to understand how Black girls experience schooling in the midst of educational reform efforts. So one thing about this district is that while it was a predominantly white district, they were busing in majority of the Black student population into their schools, and they were also acknowledging that there were huge disparities with like suspensions, detentions, expulsions, and so they were trying to change into new practices and reform their efforts, which they received a lot of praise for that. Um, However, I was also examining how these like mundane interactions and the disciplinary practices and referrals that they actually shifted to in this reward system. So it's formally called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support Strategies, PBIS for short, as well as how they inappropriately used or utilized restorative justice, and how all of these practices essentially re-embedded harm and violence for Black girls. And so just to back up a little bit, when I say that they are shifting from suspensions, expulsions, and detentions, they moved to referrals, in which these were like conversations, mediations, writing assignments, or a restorative justice session with an administrator. And then rewards was to kind of prevent misbehavior. And so to honor and celebrate students who are doing things well, which the critique of that is there's a bit of coaching and training that's happening, right? When you kind of are teaching kids how to behave in a way to receive a reward. However, there was also very interesting ways in which Black girls were being rewarded, which I'll show in just a moment. And then lastly, I was really interested in exploring their acts of refusal and the spaces that they co-created for respite. And so I talked to 28 self-identified Black or African American girls, ages 10 to 14, and they were in grades 5th through 8th grade. also interviewed and worked alongside 5 other Black women, and we co-created a group with the girls called Black Girl Magic, and I'll share more about that later. And I also talked with 13 staff, teachers, administrators, and district leaders, and really used the girls, had the girls guide me in who I should be speaking with, who they thought it was important for me to talk to. So really just trying to keep them at the center of the study as well. All right, so I broke this up in a few parts. So the first part is the realities of anti-Black girl violence, really just trying to understand the gratuitous, mundane, and everyday assaults. And so I'll just start here. This is a poster board that was created by Layla, who was a 7th grade student. She was 12 years old. She attended Ward Middle School, and she created this in our group. And this was during an activity called Redefining Me. So we just asked the girls to like create a poster board all about yourself, how you want to be seen, like how you want folks to see you as well, or how you think that folks do see you generally already. But I always find it very interesting that Layla, instead of just focusing on herself, which was the activity prompts, she wrote across the top of her board, if you can see, this school is a hellhole. And so I was really interested in how Layla kind of called out what was happening and what this space actually felt like. I wasn't surprised because she frequently described the school as a hellhole in Black Girl Magic. When I talked to her, even more within and outside the group, and as well with the other girls, a lot of it had to do with the bullying that she faced from just her peers generally, but also from white students who often called Black students the N word. There were admin and staff, administrators and staff that they felt didn't do anything, didn't hold students accountable. And so they would have to engage in their own forms of self-defense or self-protection. And eventually that also led to them not reporting these incidents anymore because they felt like nothing would happen. But I think it's really important here just to highlight the language that Layla is using because she really guided how I kind of describe and understand the school as an unlivable space. And Layla really pushed me to imagine what would it look like to explicitly call this place something more than just a school she did not like or enjoy. And so I find her words to be very powerful as predominantly white suburban schools like Duncan and Ward are often painted as the gold standard for better education and opportunity. However, Layla is really teaching us to be fearless, to resist, and to call out the harm, and simultaneously refuse to praise these spaces that have been normalized as good and highlight the ways they make anti-Black violence possible. So, who exactly are white suburban schools good for? And whose suffering is required to make schools like Duncan and Ward exceptional? How are these schools good for some and hellholes for others? In this case, Black girls. And so, with that being the context set, right, a lot of the conversations that I would have with the girls, they often would also describe how just their day to day. And honestly, it just felt like from the beginning of the day, getting on the school bus all the way to the end of the day, like there was just no break. And so there was negative experiences on the school bus. There were incidents in which a school bus driver had physically assaulted a Black girl on the bus. He also would be very punitive, writing them up, disciplining them. Ironically, there were also students who would be getting suspended from the bus, and so they would have to find other means to get to school. Once they are in the school building, there's hyper surveillance from teachers and staff during and after school, even down to like janitorial staff that would prevent the girls from utilizing a particular bathroom that was near our group space after school. Differential treatment and punitive outcomes from teachers, staff, and school administrators. There was erasure overall in the curriculum, like the girls did not see themselves, let alone any type of affirming curriculum around Black folks generally. And then there were persistent experiences with bullying from peers and school leaders dismissing these girls' experiences and not holding their peers accountable. And so I'll just turn to the girls for a moment to talk about their classroom interactions. So Asia, who's a 7th grade student at Duncan Middle School, she says, let's say I forget something and another student will forget the same thing. I feel like she, talking about her teacher, is more disappointed in me. Or if I mess up on something, I'll get downgraded, having her grade lowered, compared to if a white person did it. They wouldn't get downgraded. Their grade would just stay the same. Like she put a note on their paper, like, oh, fix this next time. And then Savannah, who's a fifth grade student at Ward Middle School, she says, so it was one time I was trying to get my test done and I needed help. And she told me she was trying to focus on the other people. And I feel like she was being a little racist because she was listening to the other color skin or non-Black students and stuff. So first, this language, right, also speaks to the lack of discussion or acknowledgement of Blackness, even in their curriculum. Like oftentimes the girls will refer to themselves as colored. They wouldn't call themselves Black or African American until after we would have like more conversations in the group. So the languaging was one thing to be pointed out, but Asia really talks about how Black girls are not allowed to make mistakes and they don't even receive the kind of feedback and encouragement on their assignments, right? And maybe Savannah acknowledges that, okay, yeah, as a Black girl, you can't make mistakes. So let me go ahead and ask my teacher for help, right? To get ahead of that. But even then, she speaks to how she's persistently ignored and how she remains invisible in the classroom. So I know this is a text heavy slide. I'm going to read this out loud for us, but I wanted to take a moment to highlight this reward system that I was telling you about. So it's absolutely not true to say that Black girls did not receive rewards because they did. But it was just a particular way in which they were being rewarded. So I'll read them. This is for Bridget, who was an eighth grade student, and Raina, who was a sixth grade student, and they both attended Duncan Middle School. So Bridget is my go-to girl. Anything that I need, she will do, whether it's helping another group with their work or running an errand or asking Mrs. Brown something for me or handing back papers. It doesn't matter. She will do anything to help me or anyone in the class. She is just the best student in the world. Thanks, Bridget. You are awesome. And then the second one says, Bridget was a great help today. She offered to help students get logged into their computers and into the testing site. I like how helpful and kind and caring and considerate she always is. Such a positive attitude is going to carry her far in life. The third one says, a student in my class has a concussion. As a result, she did not feel well enough to go outside for recess after lunch. Bridget chose to accompany the student back to my room and spend the rest of recess with her. By doing this, Bridget took what could potentially be a sad situation and made it fun for this child. I greatly appreciate Bridget's kind heart. And then the last one for Raina, I appreciate how willing you, Raina, are to always help your friends and classmates. One thing that is extra special is even when there was a student that wasn't nice to you earlier in the day, you still helped that student out when they needed it. That was so kind and selfless of you. Keep being awesome. And so, in many ways, as you can probably already see, Bridget becomes the stereotypical mammy, the caregiver, the helper, the quote unquote good Black girl. Receiving an award for these behaviors sends a message that Bridget must do these things for acceptance, for approval, and to be deemed essential in the classroom. This kind of praise from her teachers is dangerous as it carves out a single image of how a Black girl should be within and outside the school in order to, quote, carry her far in life. Other students are allowed to just be, to engage in childhood behaviors. However, these awards place additional expectations on Bridget to continue her service to her peers and teachers in order to experience the same praise and access as her non-Black classmates. These awards encourage Bridget's conformity to a Black girlhood that is only legitimized based on how she cares for and nurtures others. These award descriptions show how Bridget's suffering at school is rooted in the denial of her right to be a student who can just go to class, participate, and leave like most others. She instead goes out of her way to be recognized and acknowledged positively by her teacher, as the only other alternatives for Black girls are to be ignored or punished. And in the case of Raina, when I sat down with Raina for an interview about her experiences at school, she was honestly brought to tears when she told me about just the levels of racism and bullying that she dealt with. However, for Raina, praise means doing everything for everyone else. And so she is being trained to align being a good student with being this complicit labor and silencing her own pain. Raina's teachers are celebrated essentially for rewarding her, and their actions are deemed equitable or inclusive practices. But the conflict here is that the way Raina is rewarded is just as much anti-Black girl violence as the lack of reward or the disciplinary referral process, as these educators are trying to celebrate a particular complicit, muted, dehumanized, and less expressive Black girl. And so on the other side of the rewards, right, was the referral. In a lot of ways, these school leaders would use them to like punish Black girls' non-complicit behaviors. And so these referrals also were masking the actual violence that educators were perpetuating against Black girls when they would frame Black girls themselves as problematic. And so I'll just read this referral, which is for Tahiri, who was an eighth grade student at Ward Middle School. And this is coming from her music teacher. And it was a minor offense, and the offense was attendance. And so Tahiri had a conflict between the Kalahari Band Festival and the Chicago basketball trip and chose the Chicago trip at the last minute. I asked her about this on Thursday morning. She started by lying to me, saying she had a doctor's appointment, but I called her on it right away. I couldn't quite get if she was telling the truth or not, so I gave a little speech about letting the band down when we were counting on her to go to the band festival. Then she skipped seventh hour band the next day. And so this referral against Tahiri is written with assumptions that frame her as untrustworthy. Her teacher's referral punishes her perceived indecisiveness and really suggests that she might be lying about the reason for switching trips. This assumption also reflects a broader pattern in which Black girls are not afforded the same freedom to make choices for themselves that do not include considering, helping, or meeting the expectations of others. She was expected to prioritize the band's needs over her own interests. When she chose the basketball game instead, her teacher responded with shame and blame and lectured her on how she had let others down. Her teacher's actions of shaming and punishing her also caused her to skip class the next day. So when Black girls prioritize themselves and the things they want or need, or choose to escape the violence, they receive referrals and continue to suffer from this subtle, regular, routinized shaping of their behavior. Furthermore, they really become disposable and weren't being, quote, I guess, written up, and the illegibility of their childhood is then magnified. And so, in a lot of ways, the girls were also engaging in these acts of refusal during the school day, but also in our group space. And so, I wanted to highlight that as well. But I will say some of their responses, things that I observed and witnessed, but also things that they shared with me, looked like them just completely shutting down, or this language that they use of I just keep to myself, meaning they would self isolate or they would start to self silence themselves. Some of them did resist or talk back or engaged in their own forms of like self defense, or self protection, and especially when it came to like physical attacks or violence. But a lot of them also would just choose to leave the classroom. And so this is an example from Vanessa, who is a seventh grade student at Ward Middle School. And this is a referral. She was written up by her teacher, but we'll just kind of get into it. So it's a minor write-up avoiding tasks or activities. And so it says, today the kids shared and submitted their final project website for English class. Unfortunately, Vanessa did not complete one. Instead, on her site, she wrote, "Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I hate this school. I'm not doing no more work. We only got 1 week left. There ain't no time for this bull, period. I'm done." And so I really think it's important to really highlight Vanessa's words and what it is that she is trying to tell us. Black Studies scholar Christina Sharp uses a technique of Black annotation and redaction to expose what Black folks are really trying to say. And so as she models Christina Sharp, I redact descriptive details and leave Black girls' actual words exposed. And so the redacted write-up would just be Vanessa saying, I hate this school. I'm not doing no more work. We only got 1 more week left. Ain't no time for this bull, period. I'm done. And so if we revisit this redacted version of the report, this would call me to question what would make a 12-year-old Black girl hate school and ask how she got to this level of exhaustion with only 1 week of school remaining. It's clear that she is worn out, she is fed up, she is done. Her expressed hatred for the school, I'm sorry, and isn't of itself an act of refusal. And she's being very clear that something is wrong and she no longer has time for this. But who is going to show up for her and support her? I took this statement literally because she longed for more community at the school rather than the isolation she continuously felt, which she shared with us in our group collective. She also faced a lot of bullying and racism from her peers, as well as had her own negative interactions on the school bus and had dealt with school suspension or suspensions from the school bus as well. And so this was also coupled with the fact that she was written up 22 times in just this academic year alone. And so Vanessa's actions of writing and submitting her pain, right, as part of her assignment was met with punitively ignoring and muting Black suffering by her teacher's formal write up and later apparent notification and consultation. This example exposes how Black girls are not granted space to express their frustrations and negative feelings without being policed. They are not allowed to have ill feelings toward the school or their teacher. I think most importantly, this also reflects what scholar Ruha Benjamin describes as a weathering effect that hostile environments have on Black people. As social stressors and oppressors get under our skin, into our bloodstreams, they burden our organs, they overload our systems, and they wear us down over time. And so Vanessa and Black girls like her get tired, worn out, and weathered by anti-Black school violence and wrestle with this lack of care and concern from adults in the school building and either risk the punitive consequences of making their frustrations known or worse, bottle it up inside and leave it unaddressed, causing further wear and tear on their psyche and mental well-being. And so I'll go now into the final part of this, which is the alternative sites of educational respite and fugitive space. I just really first have to note that Black people have always created alternative educational space. And so I want to honor this deep legacy, in which it was not just about education, but also health and wellness, survival, safety, and navigating the experiences of being Black in America. And so we think about SNCC Freedom Schools and the Black Panther Party's community schools that utilize political education to really resist and disrupt all forms of violence. Also, the role that Black women played as school leaders and organizers within these spaces were critically important. And I see that legacy being held on to through the curation of Black girl spaces, which are spaces that are co-constructed with Black women and girls as well. And so I really want to look deeper into the role of Black education space and Black girl spaces and what they play in shaping a type of respite or fugitivity for Black youth. And so the Black Girl Magic program, which we named it that together as a group, is something that I also refer to as this fugitive Black girl space. This is some of the artwork that we created in the space, and the photo on the bottom is like a photo of our group as well. And so this site was created as a space of refuge within both of the schools that was created by myself, the girls, and 5 other Black women that I had deep connections with at the time. And so we really tried to demonstrate how a fugitive Black girl space could offer an embodied but also a psychological moment of relief and escape for Black girls, even within the same school buildings where they endured harm. And so these spaces became a necessary spatial intervention that mirrors the loopholes of the retreat or the hush harbors for Black girls amid social and psychic threats on their well-being. And they also exist as alternatives to this traditional schooling, or rather supports an approach towards something that I call an unschooling. And so this space was really guided by what the girls wanted as well and what they felt like liberation might look like for them, even though, to be honest, those moments were very fleeting, as we still remained within the confines of the school building. They would quite literally be surveilled and disciplined immediately upon their exit from our group space. And so I don't want to like over glorify these spaces, but a lot of what we did there was very powerful, which was a lot of conversations about being a Black girl and just their daily experiences and curiosities. I'm paying attention to the time, so I'll try to move a little bit quickly. But I'll just really honor Savannah. I talk about her a lot in this quote a lot. when I talk about my work, just because it always still hits me, even these years later. And I don't think I will ever get over what she said to me. And so, really focusing on breathing as refusal. And so, we were just talking about the impact of Black Girl Magic and how she feels about the group. And she says, when I first come to school, I just cannot wait till lunch on Wednesday because it's like, oh my God, we got Black Girl Magic today. Yes. And then I'd be a little mad in the morning time because I wish Black Girl Magic would start right when you get to school. But then my environment and my skin gets brighter when we come to Black Girl Magic later on. And so we just keep talking, keep talking. And then she starts to thank me. And she says, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for us. You made me come out of my shell and just breathe and not be scared or shy to speak what I have to say. So, yeah, thank you. And the reasons I continue to be overwhelmed by Savannah's gratitude for Black Girl Magic is because although I was happy that she enjoyed the group, I really realized the depths and the impact and the necessity of a space for her to survive through the most taken for granted action of breathing. An 11-year-old Black girl was expressing her gratefulness to have breath and to just breathe in an environment, the school, in which the push was always towards Black death. What does it mean that Black Girl Magic is the space that consistently gives this young girl breath while existing within a school that, quote, persists in choking the life out of her, to quote Christina Sharp? Black Girl Magic in this moment became the work of, quote, keeping breath in the Black girl body and the space that helps Black girls survive. Savannah situates breathing as both a space and location mapped as a site of Black girl fugitivity. Therefore, we must continue to locate the spaces that allow Black girls to breathe and wrestle with the realities that finding spaces to breathe for Black girls is also another fugitive act and refusal that Black girls have to negotiate during the school day, which they shouldn't have to do that. Um, in my conversations with other Black girls like Savannah, I would always ask them what they would change about Black Girl Magic. And I was most often met with the response, more time or more days, and perhaps more just to breathe. And so I'm gonna kind of skip over this just for the sake of time. But this was one of our last days in the group. We were just outside of Duncan Middle School with the girls, and we were jumping double dutch, and they had chalk, and so they were like drawing things on the ground. One thing I didn't say is that a lot of the girls like didn't even really want to join the group because it was called Black Girl Magic. So many of them had just a negative perception or negative feelings about being Black or Black girlhood. And so it took a lot of work in our space, a lot of vulnerability, but at a certain point, they just reached this level where Blackness became something that they were actually proud of. And so as I started walking around, I saw these images, and of course, me being me, I like took photos because I want to hold on to them forever. But their affirmations were accompanied with drawings of Black girls wearing crowns, stick figures, holding hands, and hearts surrounding their writing. And in this moment, they didn't require any prompts or directions from us as the facilitators, which we typically would provide. But they simply just took the chalk, dived right in, and created their own celebration of Black girlhood. They spread the message that Black girlhood and BGM were something to be proud of, and they rightfully proclaimed it on the concrete in front of Duncan, a place where so many of them learned to dislike and disown their Blackness. Like the girls in my study, though, I refuse to illustrate a story about resilience, but rather one that forces us to see how Black girls deserve better. Because fugitivity, while it is important, it is not celebratory. My attempt is to call for scholars, organizers, and educators who, like Black girls, call out the persistence of anti-Blackness, who only are able to find respite in being able to breathe in alternative educational spaces. And so we must begin to understand the possibilities for and within fugitive Black girl space as foundational to addressing anti-Black girl violence and the harm that permeates when Black girls return to schools and classrooms. And so I'll just end asking, where do we go from here? What is the role of the school, and what must we do right now as we prepare to exit? In other words, what would it mean to add the school to our abolitionist agenda? Are we ready to wrestle with that fact and reality, especially given that every time we are trying to fix and correct the school, it demands our suffering? And what might it look like to abolish? What might we need to return to in our traditional Black education and Black study? In this current political moment where we are also witnessing and very right wing and moving away from the dismantling of education and educational space, the return to or the continuation of hyperpunitive anti-Black violence, and the attempted silencing of Black folks, Black communities, and Black youth, as well as Black studies. What does it mean for Black girls to grow up in this current moment? And what does that mean for our work with and alongside them, as well as all Black youth? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I mean, we could have gone on a whole nother hour with that. And I know it's hard, and I know many of us have experienced much of what you shared. And many of the questions that we do have in the chat are really about what can be done. So I don't know if you have a link, or because I know we have just a little bit of time, but if you have a link or something that that folks can go for further information on, like policy recommendations, or we have organizers here who want, we trying to figure out the handles. And so we have questions about, the adultification, the negative impacts, what can we do? Because there is the creating the Black fugitive space, right? But also we have so many people in these institutions. So I wanted to do that. And then there was a question also about if you could say, just make sure a little bit on Black Girlhood and Girl Interrupted, there's folks, or if there's a link for further reading around that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all so much. I think the what do we do is a question that I'm still also wrestling with myself. And I don't want to force us into quick solution because I feel like that's what often happens. At least as a person who is trained in education, we get into quick solution and we don't actually address the problem. And so it's been so important for me to really sit with Black girls, to ask them what they want, what they need. And the reality is that they are still in our school buildings. And so I would even just ask them simple questions like, what would make school better for you? And sometimes they would say simple things like, I wish we did more labs versus like writing papers, like, which really to me showed their creativity, right? So how do we create more opportunity for creativity, for artistic expression, etc.? Some of them were like, I just wish the hallways were bigger, right? And I think that was speaking to like the ways they've talked about how students would literally just physically run into them, right? They were just tired of being invisible and unseen, and how their body was always a site for just being violated, essentially. And so I think as organizers, and I'll be completely honest, I feel like a lot of how I even came to creating a space was really I guess being honest with myself and realizing like the sites and places that I felt safe as a Black girl was often outside of the school building. It was often in a community-based program, right? It was often, and so for my organizers in the room, like you all are doing the work and you are the blueprint. I just ask for whether it's academic scholars, organizers, etc., that we make sure to bring Black youth with us, because I think sometimes as adults, we tend to think that we have to guide, we have to do the things, and yes, we have to keep them safe, but that doesn't mean that we just kind of tell them what they need. Like we have to
That's
bring them
right.
into the conversations with us, and allow them to guide. So many of our leaders, right, were youth themselves, and so I think we just have to remember that too, and especially so, of course, I'm going to say for Black girls as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wish that we had time for like verbal questions because we literally in 2 minutes. But one question that we will make sure everybody has more information on you and how to also get more information on the things that you've written and all of that, because that's really important. There's one question I think you could probably knock out in 30 seconds or so before we have to split to go to the classes, and that is this same, do you see the same phenomenon at the same level in predominantly Black schools?
Yeah, so that was I think I So I try to be very brief, but the reality is that the way in which we do schooling is the problem. And so, yes, I do see that. I also worked in a school that was predominantly Black with a Black principal, a Black woman principal, and like even the ways that they would see Black girls was very problematized. I was invited into this school through like Black staff who genuinely cared about Black youth, but a lot of the framing was also like, all they're doing is fighting. We don't know what to do with them, right? And so I think that it's something about the ways in which education is a site of anti-Black violence. Schooling continues to be a site of anti-Blackness that does not also see Black girls, that expects Black girls to be a certain way. And so I think that, yes, I would just say the short answer is yes, I see this in even the most diverse of schools. And I'll point to a scholar whose work I really, really adore is Savannah Changé. She writes about a school that's actually very social justice oriented and very diverse, and how they still perpetuate anti-Blackness as well too. So yeah.
No, I appreciate that. So, one, thank you again. We obviously this is something we need to dig into, and also your call to action for us to listen, engage, and build with our Black women and girls as comrades, as co-architects in how we build and redesign that. I think is so important. So, I want to see that love in the chat. Uh, because this was really powerful, and I just so appreciate you and your work and your willingness to stand in this place, and also as a scholar to stand in a place that I don't know. I'm listening. We gonna rock this together. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you so much. If it's okay, I could just drop my contact in the chat if people
Please
want to
do
connect.
that because
Okay.
people are trying to get at all of that.
Thank you.
And if
Thank
you
you.
have a website where you are posting work or what
Mhm.
all the things, we want to know all the things. We want to see what you posting on Instagram. We want to know all the things.
I got you. Thanks so much, y'all. This has been amazing. I appreciate y'all.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you. All right, so we are. Thank you for that. Y'all see it in the chat. Make sure you save that. And then we are about to transition to our classes. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Ashley. You are everything.
Thanks so much, everybody. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.